Look, Genie, we're both long in the tooth from the JAG Corps, right? 92, 93, 90, 96, whatever. But back when I first joined the JAG Corps, I had never heard of the term toxic leadership. Just never heard of it. Must have been called something else. But today, almost everybody is really leading from the perspective of avoiding toxic leadership. And have you dealt with any toxic leadership cases?
More than I would have imagined. They come up constantly now. I think it's mainly because everything is switching. Just like you're saying, we're sort of long in the tooth. The people at the top of our food chain, the generals, the colonels, they came in about that time too, when it was a totally different way that you led. And so this is how they were brought up, to lead a certain way. And now as they're actually leading, things have changed. And a lot of times you don't know that you've got a toxic leadership issue until someone below you says something, because you think you're doing fine. So what happens is someone under your command makes a complaint. It goes to the person above you. They have to look at it. And that's what a lot of my clients have trouble understanding. You have to look at it. If the person above you doesn't look at it, it goes to the person above them, and they don't know you. They know you even less than this person here. So what you're trying to do is two things. One is get your client to understand it's not personal. It's not personal. It's something that we have to do now. And the second thing you're trying to do is to get your client to understand the advantages, because as a leader, they're talking to the person above them. If they can show the person above them, not only am I not a toxic leader, but I'm going to take this in a really good way. I'm going to say, oh, I've looked into this, and perhaps I could use more training in this area. And I'm so glad this person brought this to my attention. I would not have known otherwise. That person who is your rater is going to go, wow, this guy's exactly what I want. I want someone who can compromise. I want someone who can understand when they've messed up. I want someone who can fix it. And I want someone who learns from experience. It's win-win at that point. But I have to get the client to see that, because it does feel so personal when it happens. Nobody wants to be a bad leader. Everybody's trying. I think the other issue we've got is a lot of services don't give a lot of leadership training until the person's already in the position. So a lot of your complaints that you get are when that person first comes in. The other thing we've got are a lot of smart people below them. This is the one way to get a lot of things you want. And I have to talk to my clients about that as well. That's part of it not being personal. Did this person ask you for something? Did you give them an OER they didn't like? What happened here? Because that's going to explain a lot of what's happening here.
Right. I would look, this gives my age away, but today, if you don't like something that's happened to you, you just have to say your boss is a toxic leader, and boom, you've caused that person more grief than you could ever cause anyone in a leadership position.
Oh, it's very similar in our day to sexual harassment, right? That was the way that used to happen. And like I said, service members are smart. There's nothing wrong with saying someone's a toxic leader, especially if they are. You want that person to know. You want that person to be investigated. But our job as a person who's working with the leader, if that's the client, is to develop a response that not only helps to show that they're not a toxic leader, but to say, even if I was, I've learned so much from this experience. I would like to talk with this person with your permission, sir. That's the other thing. Most of these leaders are very proactive. And so when they come to see me, my first thing I say to them is, please do not discuss this with the person who made the complaint. Please do not go and talk to everyone over them to ask what they're going to say. Do not do this. Let me do this for you.
That would be terrible, because you could be interfering with an administrative procedure. You could be interfering if there was action later, obstruction of justice, influencing those individuals.
If they do that before they talk to you, it's too late. You
Right.
can't help them a lot at that point. So right when they come in to see me, I make sure that we're all clear that they're just going to keep doing a great job and acting like this doesn't even bother them, and treat the person with respect and just keep moving and let me worry about the other things.
Right. And so this toxic leadership is grounded in like Article 92 of lawful orders, Article 93, cruelty and maltreatment, and then 133, 134, conduct unbecoming, and prejudicial to good order and discipline. That's kind of where you can pigeonhole toxic leadership into violating the UCMJ. And, there's definition within all the services of counterproductive and toxic leadership. But I've discovered that as you research deep into the policy and doctrine of the services, there's contradictory information out there. It says a good leader does X, Y, and Z, whereas in toxic leadership stuff, a bad leader does X, Y, and Z. And they're almost the same thing.
Well, yeah, that's very similar. And then the PAM, it talks about affable and effective. Okay, there's affable and effective, and there's affable effective. So if somebody comes in, I'm going to have to show which one they actually are. I'm not ineffective because what I'm trying to do was accomplished. I appreciate that this person didn't like the way I did it, but my goal as a leader is to meet my objectives. So I can't make everyone under me happy. I have to choose. But as long as I'm not a toxic leader, sir or ma'am, I'm doing what you've asked me to do. And that's sort of where you want them to end up, if possible.
Right. And so when you're advising somebody who's going through a toxic leadership investigation, I mean, you're going to want to gather all the documents. You're going to want to look at the past evaluations. You're going to look at their counseling forms. You're going to want to look at OERs. You're going to want to look at counseling statements. And you're going to want to look at climate surveys from the unit to determine what are the people saying. And then you need to ask the client, who's going to say you're a great leader, right? And maybe this is just an isolated complaint of two disgruntled soldiers versus the overall, history of the leadership of that particular individual.
I think with most of these, the ones I've dealt with, there are two different types. You've got civilians making the complaints, and you have military making the complaints. And sometimes those are a little different. What's been the most interesting to work on as an attorney and the most effective is, because I'm at a training post, or I was at a training post, is you have an objective. Okay, the objective is not personal, it is not person-directed, right? But you have a person that's saying, I didn't get what I was supposed to get. So what I'm trying to do is get my client to be able to explain, this was not personal with this person. I did do that, but it was not personal. Because a lot of times they get sort of stuck in that loop of, I've got to prove I treated this person okay. I wasn't a toxic leader. When what they're really going to need to do is say, this is the objective you've given me, is to produce these leaders, to train these service members. This is why I did this. I have no ill will towards this person. I think it's a great person. They've done a lot of good things. You always want to make that. You don't ever want to corner someone as responding to a leadership. You don't want to make this totally black and white. You always want to be able to say, maybe if I'd done this, he wouldn't have made that complaint, and I now know that. But this is my objective, this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I've accomplished. So can we look at that part of it? Because it's two different things.
Right. Well, you can be somebody who demands performance and demands excellence and not be a toxic leader. I mean, that's what we want in our military. We want our forces to fight and win our nation's wars. And if a leader believes that that's not happening, may have a responsibility to ensure readiness of our troops. And that's through leadership. Now, you can't be an ass about it, right? And you can't sit down and target people because you don't like them. That's unlawful, and you should be reprimanded for that. But if somebody just doesn't like your leadership style because you demand accountability, that is not toxic leadership.
No, and I think it also goes with your point earlier. We have sort of become, we don't want to become a zero defect army. We really want to look for people who can learn and who can understand and who can adjust. That's what you want. You don't want someone who is totally rigid and terrified to make a decision because of what's going to happen or what's going to be said about them. So it's an interesting split, because the person who's doing the investigation, the person that you're responding to, that we're helping you respond to, is the one who's going to make that call. And a lot of times it doesn't have a UCMJ thing attached. A lot of time it's toxic leadership just as an investigation. And that's when you have to go into the nitty gritty, as you just stated, about the climate surveys and everything else, to try to show these things. And if I get in there and I see that there are some climate surveys, I see that there are some issues, then you've got to be crafting the response to show that you've learned the teaching point. The Army or Navy, whoever, has all of this invested in me, all my training. This is what I've learned. This is what I will do in the future. This is what I will not do. That's where we want our leaders to be.
I agree. If you're facing a toxic leadership investigation or counterproductive leadership investigation, we're the Law Office of Will M. Helixon. We are your warrior advocates. You defend the nation. we defend you.